Thank you all for joining us. We're really grateful to have you here for the third webinar of the From Postdoc to Research Faculty Crash Course, which is being hosted in collaboration with Baycrest, CAMH, UHN, SickKids, Sinai Health, Toronto Metropolitan University Faculty of Engineering and Architectural Science, Unity Health, Temerity Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto, and University of Toronto Schmidt Futures. If you've joined us for the first two sessions, welcome back. If you weren't able to make it and this is your first session, you can catch up on what you missed by watching the session recordings, which are on the program website. So today we're going to go through the next section, which is research statements. Before we get started too far, I want to acknowledge the land that we are currently on. The organizing committee is based in Toronto, and we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize that many of you may be joining from other places outside of Toronto, so we encourage you to learn about the land that you're currently on and take a moment to reflect on what that means. So just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get started. We are recording today's webinar, and the slides and recording will be available on the program website. We will be doing some evaluation, and I'll pass it over to my partner to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. So welcome all. And yes, many of you who have joined us before will have already completed a baseline survey for us. Thank you so much for doing that. If you didn't get a chance to do it, you probably will have gotten a nudge from a colleague of mine, Tega Atebwe, and would really, really value your time in responding to that. And then you'll be receiving a new evaluation to complete a survey at the end of our time together today, around 1:25, around 1:30 or so. Would really appreciate you taking the time if you can at all manage it. These kinds of evals are really important for us to make the case for giving these kinds of courses and offerings, but also to keep getting better. We really take your feedback seriously. We use them to guide what we do next. So we've kept them as short as we possibly could, I promise. Yeah, just keep an eye out for emails from a CAMH address from someone you don't know, that asking you to provide your thoughts to help us keep getting better and meeting your needs as best we can.
Amazing. In addition, we also highly recommend that you ask questions if you have any at any time. We're going to be using Slido for Q&A. So I'll pop this up quickly. This is how you can join. So you can either use the QR code or go to slido.com and add in the code 4126088. My colleague Jordan will also put the link in the chat throughout the session. We'll bring the slide up later on so we can gather your questions and start to answer them. So just a little bit of a agenda. I'm excited to start this session with a discussion on how to write a research statement. For any of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Amanda Very, and I'm the manager of the Office of Research Trainees at the University Health Network. In full transparency, I've never actually applied to faculty positions before, and I've never sat on a committee that has selected faculty before. And so for my presentation, I'm mostly going to focus on the theoretical tips based on the application resources from top universities like University of California, San Francisco, MIT, and Cornell. And at the end of my part of the presentation, I'll share those sources with you so that you can read more or learn more. The second session will be led by my wonderful partner. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi all, it's just really special and fun to be with you together today. My name is Lena Quilty. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I'm a senior scientist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, or CAMH, and also an associate professor these days at the University of Toronto. I have applied to these kinds of research faculty positions, both within universities and within university affiliated hospital settings. So I have some of that first line experience, but that was a little bit more dated. I think most of the insights that I'm going to have of value for you today is as either a lead or a member of a faculty search committee. And that is something that I've been doing here at CAMH for some time. So I'm hoping to in some cases reinforce the wonderful messaging from Amanda, but also just to bring it to life a little bit and perhaps demystify, show you under the hood a little bit what it really is like for those on the hiring end and what really stands out to us and more importantly how to stand out to us and get into those kinds of details.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And then we'll leave it lots and lots of time for questions and answers. And again, we'll use Slido for that. Okay, so let's get started. What is a research statement? So a research statement is an integral part of the faculty application. It's one of many different pieces that you'll have to put together, of which we'll try to cover. We will cover all of the different pieces in this series. It's usually a 1 to 3 page document describing your research trajectory, including your past, current, and future research. So the desired length of your research statement might be different depending on what fields you are in or the institution you are applying to. So as always, when applying, check the job posting to see if there are any specifications that you need to follow that'll help you just kind of get started. Now, all your application documents are an opportunity to tell the search committee about you and why you are a good fit for the job. In the research statement specifically, you want to focus on showcasing your research because there's other documents like your CV, your cover letter, your teaching dossier that will highlight the other parts of you. And so the research statement should complement all of that, but provide further insights into your research and the important factors that influence your research that you maybe didn't get to highlight in as many or as much detail as you wanted to in the CV or other sections. This is also a great opportunity to share things like your short-term and long-term research goals and the areas of research that you have expertise or exceptional skills in. You also get the opportunity to share your past research successes to demonstrate your credibility you have that will guarantee that you will achieve your future research goals, which you'll also outline. You can also showcase your fundability and your ability to get competitive grants to support your research because that's a major part of your success in the long term. You can showcase your research independence, separate from your past research supervisors. You can highlight the potential impact of your work. And lastly, you can show why you're a good fit for the position and the department you're applying to. And we'll go into all of these in a little bit more detail. So next we'll discuss what you should include in your research statement. Now there isn't one set way or template that you should use to design your research statement. You can read a lot of different things about it. And what we're focusing on here are like the common sections that are recommended by many universities that you should include. So we'll go through these quickly and then we'll dive in deeper to each one. So it's recommended that you have a section describing what your overall research questions are and the significance or impact to the field. You also want to include information on your past research, which can include your graduate research or even your undergraduate research or any other research you had if it's relevant. You should also have a section describing your current research, which is the work that you're doing during your postdoc. And then a large part or a substantial chunk of real estate of your research statement should be about your future research, which is the research that you're proposing that you'll do as an independent researcher at their institute. And this should include both short and long-term goals. So here I've outlined it kind of in a chronological order. Which is a common path that people take, but there's not just one formula of how you can do this. I've seen other examples that I really like where if you have research into more than one area, you can also separate your research statement into sections where you discuss your problem, past, current, and future research for each research question separately. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. And some of the resources that I'll share with you at the end also have examples that you can look at so you can kind of see the different ways people lay these out. So next, let's dive deeper into each section. So for the research problem and impact section, you want to outline some of the major questions in the field and then narrow in on the specific goals or research questions that you aim to address. So for example, if I was using an example from my PhD, I could describe how invasive fungal infections have mortality rates close to 40%, and that rising rates of antifungal resistance are hampering our ability to treat those infections. So that's the big problem in the field that many people are trying to solve. Then I would outline the specific research problems in that area that I specifically am choosing to address. So narrowing it down a little bit further to your corner that you're trying to tackle. So for example, my PhD was identifying new small molecules that can be used as antifungals that specifically target the fungal's virulence traits. Next, what you have to do is outline what your approach would be to achieving that research goal. So we'll go into this a little bit more later, but you can describe the overall arching approach, whether it be by drug screening or using structural biology. Often it's useful to include more than one approach, so they're not all dependent. Your whole project isn't dependent on one experiment that may or may not work. And most importantly, you want to explain the impact of addressing those questions and the importance that your specific work will have on the overall field. So this is really important as you want to communicate why your project is important and innovative and showcase that the institution would benefit greatly from having you as part of their research community. So that impact and importance is something we're going to talk about a lot because that's really what's going to excite the committee. So, what I described follows the hourglass concept of storytelling, which is displayed on the left here. And it's from a resource from the MIT Communications Lab. And again, you'll have a link to this in the slides that'll be posted on the program website. So, you can use this kind of storytelling model. Or you can use all kinds of different storytelling models, but I specifically like this one because it helps outline the different sections and kind of how you would go through them. So with this approach, you would first focus on the high level picture of your research by focusing on the general motivation. So this gets the audience's attention because it's something that everybody cares about. So again, going back to my example, that would be the piece where I'm talking about how antifungal resistance is on the rise and how this is a big problem because lots of people die from fungal infections. So it gets them motivated. People don't like when people get infections and die. So you hook them into why this is important. Um, Next, you're going to go into the specific motivation and the problem. So you're zooming in closer into your part of addressing that problem. To explain the research you did to address the problem and what you found. So the part that people often forget about is that you then have to invert the hourglass, which is ending back up on the big picture to remind people why they should care. So you start general, you go specifically in on your part of the problem, what you did to address the follow-up problem, what you found, but then you have to zoom back out again and end on why they should care. So this again is explaining the impact of your findings and your work. And ending back on a bigger research vision, which is the bigger picture impact that you want them to care about. So again, you capture their attention at the beginning by telling them why they should care, and then leave them satisfied at the end by telling them how you impacted the thing that they now care about. So it's just a good storytelling model to really keep their attention. Now, you can use the hourglass concept while describing your research trajectory. So here you want to tell the story of your research, including your past, current, and future research. So you can describe your past and current research during your undergrad, grad school, and postdoc with the lens of highlighting the past research accomplishments and skills that will display your credibility and how it will help you to succeed in the future directions that you propose. So to do this, you really want to make sure that you focus on highlighting your contributions, using I statements to clearly describe the work that you did and explaining was when work was done by a collaborative team or any of your collaborators. This also means that you don't have to include all of the research you've ever done. Rather, you want to focus on the research that is relevant to your future research. And this there's also the skills that you've developed that are relevant for that work as well. And this serves as a way to demonstrate that you have the skills required and the track record in this area to have future success. You can also focus on work that has the strongest impact, as that might be, more exciting and you have limited space. So you want to really highlight your strongest results. So while it might be easier to talk a lot about your past and current research, it's really important. I know I said this, but I'll say it again. It's really important to focus more of the space of the research statement on your future directions, which will occur at that institution. So you want to tell them a story that convinces them that you have a solid research plan and the skills and track record that demonstrate that you will be successful and well funded at their institution. So this is also a space where you can demonstrate your passion for research and your creativity in research design. Okay, so let's focus in a little bit more on writing about your past research. So in this section, you have the opportunity to demonstrate your credibility and your strengths by using your graduate or other past research. And like I said, you can use your research as far as you want. If you want to include undergrad or high school or any other experiences, you can. Just focus on the things that are relevant. So you can do this by highlighting the research skills that you've mastered, especially focusing on techniques that you will use for your future directions or your future research. This helps to paint a picture that you are the right person and the only person that can complete this project or your future directions that you're describing because you already have those skills. You also want to showcase your productivity, highlighting research questions that you've answered or advances that you've made, and mentioning work that has been published, patented, or turned into another research output, like a tool or a database. This is especially important if you are going to base your future directions on a tool or a database or some kind of other research project that you've done in the past. It's great to mention that in your past research. Next, you can highlight the fundability of your research by highlighting your successes at being funded in the past, including highlighting any relevant grants, awards, or fellowships. Just like you would do in your CV, you can include the quantitative data of how successful you were, including the number of grants that you got and the dollar value. That's often has a larger impact to show how successful you've been. This together showcases that you have a track record of creating research products as well as being funded. And that kind of shows that you should continue to have that success in the future. You can also highlight your teamwork and successful research collaborations and the impact and significance of your work. Again, this shows that you have track record and that you have the capability of working in teams, building successful collaborations, which you'll continue to do in the future, and that you do impactful work and will continue to do so if they hire you and you work at their institution. Next up, for your current research, this is usually your postdoc research. I know in some fields you can apply to faculty jobs straight out of your PhD, but we're assuming in this case that you're applying after a postdoc. So here you want to describe the research questions that your current postdoc work aims to answer and explain how you are tackling these research questions. So this includes highlighting your results and findings, both findings that have resulted in publications and ones that you're still working on. Remembering the hourglass concept, you also want to include the significance of these results to show the impact of the work. And in this section, you can also highlight any skills or techniques that you've mastered or any resources that you've generated that you will use in the future. So for example, if your current postdoc research has included developing a database of protein-protein interactions in the cell that will be critical for your future research questions, that's a great thing to mention here. Or if you've completed the first stage in a clinical trial that will be proceeding to the next stage, that's another great thing. Or if you've mastered NMR, and that will help you to address future research questions at their institution, that's another great thing to mention. So you can also include preliminary results that open up new research questions, as these can help you to describe your future research program, which I'll explain in the next section. So you can explain what new questions these preliminary results present and how you will answer them during future work. And if you can also include compelling figures in your current research section if they help you to effectively demonstrate your research findings and critical information needed for them to understand your project or what you're going to be doing in the future. Now, this is really important to remember is that there's limited space. You will often only have 3 pages or less. And so you want to use images and preliminary results very strategically, very sparsely, and only use them as required. Another thing, as I've seen from other people's applications, sometimes you'll try to put too many in and then we'll make them really, really small so that you can fit more in. And then that compromises on the readability of your research statement. So definitely focus on putting only figures in that are compelling and necessary to tell the story and keep them at reasonable size. This is for readability. So the next section is your future research, which we've said many times, but we'll say again, should be the major focus of your research statement and should take up a significant part of the real estate. So here you want to tackle your short and long-term research goals, thinking about 2 to 10 years. And these are the questions that you'll tackle during your faculty position. Ideally, these research goals should tie to your current and past research so that they can see that your past research success has laid the foundation for your future successes. It'll also show that you have the expertise and the skills to achieve these future goals. So you want to very clearly communicate your research plan and ensure that it is well thought out and realistic. And I think a great thing here is you will maybe want to talk this out with your peers to ensure that you have a logical and clear focus. Um, and even sometimes even asking people who are slightly outside of your research lab, just to see if it makes sense, if it's clear, and if everything flows well. So here it'll also be integral to show your creativity and approach so that you can show your niche in the research and your independence. And while you want to build off your postdoc work so that you can show that track record and that you've built those skills and expertise to succeed, it's really integral that you distinguish that this current work from the work you and your PI are doing. So you want to separate the work that you've done in the past with your PI and the work that you will be doing in the future. And the main reason for this is that that lab and that research already exists and is being funded by different institutions. So it's important to understand, for people to understand how your project in the new institution will be different and will fill an unmet gap, a different unmet gap in the field. You also want to include multiple aims, approaches, and plans so that you will be successful regardless if one approach fails. Your whole project or future goals can't be contingent on one experiment that could go wrong. So this really helps to show that you've thought things out, you have a good plan, you're prepared for whatever comes next, because we all know science is tricky, and you can have the best plan ever, but things might not go your way. So it's important that you have multiple approaches and steps to show that no matter what happens, you have a plan for success. Now, one of the difficult but important parts is that you have to convince a search committee that you are the right person to tackle this research project, because you're the person who has all the right skills and resources to be successful. So again, I've said this many times, I'll say it again. To do this, you want to really highlight your unique skills, experiences, research tools, and resources that you're equipped with to tackle those problems. So this will demonstrate that you have the skills required to carry out your future research and showcase what you are bringing that is to the institution that will be a benefit to them. So really highlighting the unique parts that they will only get if they choose to hire you. You can also highlight established collaborations or industry partners that you will be bringing with you and will have access to in your research in the future. This highlights a broader skill set of teamwork and obtaining the required resources, but also could lead to new funding sources from industry partners. And nowadays, it's really important for scientists to be able to get funding from all different kinds of sources. So having a diverse portfolio and having opportunities with industry is very attractive. Now, of course, if you don't have those industry partnerships, that's fine too. You can also think about other kinds of things to highlight. So, for example, if you have funding that you will be bringing with you to the institution, it's a great thing to mention. So, for example, the CAIHR Research Excellence, Diversity, and Independence Awards, or the READY Awards, have two phases of funding. One for while you're training, so one that you access one chunk of it during your postdoc, and the other chunk of it you access when you become an independent researcher. So this is really great because it allows you to help to transition into these roles and be successful because you already have that funding in your belt. And there is a competition for a Ready that is open right now. I think the due date is in a couple of months. I'm going to share some information about that at the end, but definitely check that out if you're interested. Another example is the National Institute of Health, or NIH's K-22 Career Transition Awards. These are specifically for U.S. Citizens, but if you are a U.S. citizen, you can apply to funding for specifically for your independent research program, and this is before you have your position secured. So what's really cool about these is it shows in the institution that you're already bringing in money, and so that gives them more reason to hire you because again, it shows your fundability. Now, not many of these exist, so don't feel bad if you don't. These are pretty much the two I can find. There aren't that many options. But what you can do is kind of think about other kinds of awards that you would be competitive for, and don't just put a list of all of, oh, I think I could get this, this, and this, but use your track record of funding to kind of highlight ones that you think are within reason and within line. So, if you've been funded in the past by a particular granting agency, that would be good evidence that you might be funded by that agency again in the future. Okay, so in addition to selling yourself, you will also want to sell your research. Here's where you convince the search committee that your research is the right fit for their department. You want to highlight how your research fits the needs or goals of the department. So, in particular, if the job posting is looking for a particular research area or is trying to fill a specific gap, make sure you explain very clearly why your research fits into that area or will fill that gap. Um, Now, this isn't always clear. Sometimes calls for faculty postings are really broad. It could just be biochemistry in general. And sometimes they're really specific and they're looking for somebody in a specific area. So check that out. And if it isn't clear from the posting, you can try to do some research into the kinds of areas are in that department, how your research will fit in. If you have a network at that university, it's great to then reach out to contacts and see if they can tell you a little bit more about what they're looking for. But really seeing kind of like the breadth of the department and going from there could also work. So you also want to highlight why your research will benefit them as an institution, including any publications, funding, and prestige. So, for example, if your work has gotten picked up by media outlets in the past or is something that has been of interest to the public, that's a great thing to highlight because it will benefit the institution if you're getting good media coverage or you're helping to build this prestige and just notability of their institution in the future. You can also include any faculty members that you are excited to collaborate or work with, focusing on faculty members that you have an existing collaboration or relationship with. Now, this is important because focusing on individuals that you've already interacted with in the past or have an active or past collaboration with can be helpful because you know more about them and you can talk about them more clearly and talk about the work that you could do together. If you're basing it simply on looking at a website of the faculty and thinking about who you could collaborate with, you might make some mistakes because websites are often not up to date. So you don't want to pitch a collaboration with an individual that actually is no longer at that institution or is working in a completely different field of research. So just keep that in mind that if you know somebody from that you've met at a conference or that you've had a project with in the past, those are the better connections to focus on. You can also show fit and the work You can also show fit with the work in their research institution by thinking about the kinds of facilities they have access to and highlighting any of those, any resources or equipment that you'd be excited to use. So, for example, if your research uses MRI technologies and they just obtained a new powerful MRI, that's a really great thing to mention. A, it showcases that you've done your research and you've learned about them. But it also shows that they already have the equipment that you need to be able to succeed in your research. So that means you can hit the ground running on day one. You don't need to wait to obtain this really expensive equipment. So think about what they already have there and how you could utilize it in your research and kind of mention those things. So next up, you want to summarize the impact. And again, we're reverting that hourglass. So you want to focus on clearly explaining the importance of your research and its potential impact. And this is really cool. So to get the committee excited about your research so that they remember you, they want to hear more from you in the interview. And ultimately, you want to get them excited to have you as part of their team. The best case scenario is if they read it and they're like, "Ooh, I really want to collaborate with that person. I can see how their research could complement mine or how we could work on tackling a problem together." So really focusing on um, summarizing the impact and really selling it in a compelling way, I think is really important way to end your research statement. Again, focusing on the unique impact that you can have, not just what the impact of the field as a whole is. So, a couple last things before I hand it off. When writing your research statement, as with all storytelling, it's really important that you tailor it to your audience. So, again, it should be tailored to the specific call that you're applying to. Don't just use the same research statement for all applications. This is something that I see that people make a mistake with all the time when they're applying to regular jobs, even their cover letters and resumes. They're using the same cover letter and resume and applying to 200 jobs very, very quickly. And that's never going to be as effective as much as it's attractive to apply to a lot of places en masse. If you're not taking the time to tailor your materials, all of your applications are going to be less effective. So it is worth putting in the time to tailor the materials. Um, Thinking again about how the fact that some calls might be really broad and others might be really specific. So you want to make sure that you tailor the research statement to specifically address what they're looking for and clearly state how your research fits their call. Also, the research statement will be read by lots of different faculty members, many who might not be part of your field. You got to think about how some departments are really broad and might have people from, my PhD department had people who were working in cancer, in genomics, in microbiology, and like really covered a wide breadth of research. And while that's really great, you have to think about each one of those individual people who might be on the search committee. They're all very smart and intelligent people, but they won't know the intricacies of your research field. So really to be effective, what you want to make sure that you do is avoid using jargon or overly technical details, providing explanations on anything that's needed. Avoid acronyms, or at least when you use acronyms, make sure you're describing them well first, and then you can continue using them throughout your research statement. You want to try to be very clear and concise, and really focusing on the big picture and impact and demonstrating your passion and enthusiasm. Really don't assume that they have any kind of background knowledge. Obviously, they'll know about DNA and proteins, but so it doesn't have to be like a lay abstract, but really think about what is the knowledge that the people in that department would have and tailor it to that level. So a couple of other quick tips before I pass it on is definitely check the specifications of the posting, check for page length, font sizes, format, etc. You want to make sure that you are following all the rules and your application doesn't get thrown out for missing something. You want to always make sure that you're picking a readable font that's an appropriate size using normal and reasonable margins. it's always tempting, I think, on all application documents to kind of stretch things a bit so you can get more words in. But as always, having a balance of white space makes things more aesthetically pleasing, which will make it easier for people to read and will therefore make it more effective. You can also use headings or sections that can help you organize, especially if you're going to tackle different research sections and include kind of your past, current, and future research and the impact in each one of those sections separately. Headings can be really, really good for that, or highlighting different aims and approaches in different sections. You can also use different things like bolding and underlining to kind of emphasize important points. Again, utilize your white space and don't overcrowd things. And lastly, just try to get feedback from others. This includes getting feedback on how readable it is, how coherent it is, getting feedback from people outside your immediate research group or field to assess the level of detail and jargon. And then, of course, ensuring that there are no typos or grammar mistakes. You really want this document to showcase your writing skills because your writing skills are going to be important for securing grants in the future. So you want to really make sure that these documents are logical, clear, and error-free so that they know that you're capable of effective writing. Now, if you can get somebody like your PI or a supervisor, another faculty member at your institution to look over it, somebody who's written these documents before and has read them on a search committee, I think that's a great approach. But if you don't have access to that, even just having some of your colleagues from different labs or on your floor or things like that can be helpful. So with that, I'll leave you with some of the resources that I used to create these slides and this part of the presentation. As I mentioned before, all of the slides and all of these links will be included on the program website after. You can also always email me if you want them. My email address is amanda.very@uhn.ca. Happy to help. But in particular, I think it's really cool that some of them include examples so you can kind of see how other people have laid out their application materials. Last, I just wanted to give links to the two funding opportunities that I mentioned. So the CIHR Ready Award and the NIH Career Transition Award, the K-22. Definitely something to look at if you're eligible, because those are great things to bring with you. So we're going to go straight into the next presentation, but I just wanted to give a second to bring up the Slido once more to remind you to please put your questions in. If you see a question that you also have, please upvote it so the most popular questions go to the top and we can prioritize answering those. And now I will pass it off for the next section.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. So to continue, I'm going to be, I think, reinforcing many of the points just made and bringing them to life and drawing on what these actually, these practices and advice and recommendations look like in practice from the other side of the desk, if you like, from the search committee or the hiring committee's perspective. So as mentioned, my name is Lena Quilty, and I work in that building at Queen and Ossington, right downtown. But I wanted to give a shout out before I get into the content of my slides. The last time we gave this course, we actually had a different faculty search lead give their advice. And I want to shout out Dr. Vuxtenbalik because I was certainly inspired by that talk when I saw it in creating these guidance materials. And I also tried to integrate some of his points where I could because I thought they were a nice valuable complement to my own. He comes from a very biomedical background, whereas a lot of the searches that I've conducted have more of a focus on clinical research and public health and policy research and so on. So hopefully between the two of us, we'll have some advice and guidance to offer that will be relevant to the broad range of folks who are here with us today. So one thing I certainly did want to start with is really acknowledging how broad these processes can look, certainly between universities versus university affiliated hospitals, and even between programs. So really, and even as noted earlier, even within a certain program, sometimes the calls can be very broad, sometimes they can be very specific. So expect that diversity, and that's one of the reasons that tailoring is just so critical. The processes, what you need to submit, what they're expecting to be in each part of your package. There'll be parallels, there'll be themes, but there are going to be a lot of details that differ from one location to the next. So expect that, and expect that adaptation of your materials is going to be a large part of your work when you're applying. So certainly within our university affiliated hospital and also elsewhere like UHN, you will often have the initial selection by a core team. You'll often have a search lead, which can be a department head or a director. It really does depend on the area or the setting, who are the first to kind of go through all of the applications received and developing a short list. Usually there's administrative support to ensure that only eligible candidates are considered, but then the search lead will usually take that large group of applications, whittle it down to a short list that is then shared with a search committee, who would decide often together about who to follow up with for more in-depth interviews and next steps in the process. I have to say, one of the first things that I found surprising, being on this side of the process, was how variable it was in terms of what information you had access to depending on who you were. Obviously, the search committee lead is going to have access to the full application package of all applicants. Often, the search committee itself will have access also to the full application packages of the shortlisted applicants, but not necessarily the others. And other folks who are very important parts of the interview and hiring process, including interview panel members, individual interviewers, and so on, often only have access to a couple of documents. This is for a variety of very logistical feasibility related reasons. Really, you've got busy panel members. You don't necessarily want to give them 200 to 300 pages to review in advance of their interviews. But I think what's important to note is that the two things that pretty much everybody sees is your CV and your research statement. So these are the two statements that everybody sees, and so your care and your time and your effort into these two key pieces can't be overstated, because they're the ones that are going to see the most eyeballs, if you like, and also they work together in critical ways, and they're importantly linked to the rest of your hiring process in meaningful ways. Your research statement brings your CV to life. Your CV may involve just your core projects, but will often involve side projects that you did with someone because you hold specialty expertise in an analytic process, for example. It might hold all kinds of details of service or mentorship and other activities that you've been involved with. From a scientific perspective, your research statement brings that together and makes it much more coherent than it can be in its sprawling form in your CV, which is often many dozens of pages. Certainly, it's there. Even early career stage CVs can be well over a dozen pages, which is a lot, and really showcasing what's important and what's most to you, and also where you intend to go, is one of the really critical purposes of your research statement. It provides that clarification, that context, really really showcasing you. And this was a point that was made by Dr. Stambolic, and I couldn't agree more. Your research template is really a through line. It is the template for your job talk, your chop talk, your one-on-one interviews with folks. The points that you'll be making, you'll be elaborating upon in all of these different contexts at different stages of your hiring process. So the effort that you put into your research statement will yield just so much return and on that investment, and just really prepare you for the next steps in addition to the application itself. So next slide, please. So I wanted to also just bring to life what this is like as a search committee. You know, a search committee will often get a short list that are 5 to 10 folks. And how do we actually read research statements? We'll often skim first and then read deeply, especially of the folks who are standing out as most strong in terms of fit and in terms of readiness, et cetera, all the points that Amanda made earlier. This is one of the reasons that formatting is really going to help you. If you've got formatting that really helps with that first skimming part, like you've got strategic use of bold and subheadings, that will help certainly it's a kindness to your search committee, but it will also help ensure that folks don't just skim, that they'll skim first, be like, oh yeah, and then do the follow-up deep read. So the formatting can really ensure and facilitate the next steps. So the first pass is really looking at, clarity, coherence, and that trajectory. What we're really wanting to see is, can this person sustain an independent research program? Like, are they at that stage? Importantly, can this person get funding? This is a really important reality and job expectation in both university and university affiliated hospital settings. And finally, do they not just fit, but can they also elevate our department, our institution? Like many institutions that you're going to be applying to, in fact, I hesitate to say anything other than all of the places that you'll be applying to are looking to grow. They're looking to be the best in certain areas, and certainly to be a magnet for top tier talent who will be coming to that institution and raising their game and doing excellent science with them. And so does your research statement make it clear that that is something that you're in a position to do? So and as noted already, clarity and signal matter a lot more than certainly than volume. Lots and lots of pages are rarely going to necessarily be preferred to more concise but powerful and coherent, three or so pages. But also accessibility matters, and this is something that I think is going to be a recurring theme here. And there was an excellent comment earlier that simplicity is better than clever. I actually think simplicity is clever. I couldn't agree more. And it's actually shows your communication skills off to be able to get nuanced impact and nuanced science across in a way that is accessible. And it's a really effective way to show off your skills in that way. Next slide. So as noted, your research statement is really something of a perspective. It is telling something of your past, it's telling something of your present, but it's more than anything your 5-year plan. And there you'll see some ranges. Sometimes folks will talk about longer time spans, but in most cases that I've seen, this is the kind of time scale that is effective, that you can also reasonably think about. A lot can change in 10 years, but you can think about a research program in a 5-year chunk in a way that's going to seem reasonable to a search committee. But again, what we're looking for here is a clear research through line, and I'll unpack that a little bit more in future slides. But really, questions that matter. This is that that opening of your hourglass is important. We want to do science with impact across all of our institutions. So why do the questions that you focus in on, why do they matter, and whether or not it's for theory or policy or practice, and do keep that time scale in mind. This doesn't need to be a magnum opus that is the ultimate career impact you hope to have. Keep it tight, keep it on the 5-year agenda. You can talk bigger in your individual and panel interviews if you like, but ambition can sometimes argue a little bit with feasibility and practicality in a research statement, and you want to show that you have those logistics top of mind. You know what's reasonable to accomplish in 5 years, and that you can do it, basically. So really wanting to have strong statements about your aims or themes, so that you can see different kind of ways of organizing research statements that often will focus on aims or themes, and sometimes methodologies. Those are often other ways of organizing your research statement in a way that's effective. But making your methods and your populations really concrete is useful. That can show that methodological expertise, and also that the nuts and bolts of what it takes, not just to plan this kind of research, but to implement it, to lead it, because that is what you're effectively proposing to do. And yeah, I think I've made this last point already. Balancing ambition with feasibility is something that the research statement needs to do as a whole. So in general, I would say research statements are frequently about 3 pages. Sometimes they can be a little bit more. I've seen some go into 4. Once you're cracking 5, start considering if you really, really need it to be that long. But to be sure, every discipline and program is slightly different, and some calls are very specific about the lengths that are required. So of course, always be mindful of your local norms and of the specifics of the call. But you really want to make it easy to answer. What are your core questions? Why does it matter? And what are you going to do? What are you going to do in 5 years? And that what are you going to do? We're looking for that to be a coherent program rather than a list of projects, because a list of projects in and of itself can be quite disconnected, and they may not tell a story that is cohesive and that shows the interconnections of those projects to each other, as well as to you and to the institution that you're applying to. So it needs to be a program of research rather than a list of projects. But as noted already, this is really an opportunity to showcase your education and experience, and what that means for your current expertise and competencies, and what you're able to do. Also, it's a chance to show your independence in a way that is really challenging to show in a CV. So this is a way to certainly shout out and brag about your PIs already and the amazing training and mentorship that they have afforded you, but also where that's led you to branch out on your own, and the parts of the projects that you've had that you yourself have owned and you yourself have led, and of course the future directions of your work, which is something that a CV is less able to do. So page 1. So as noted, we're looking for a coherent program of research, and you'll often hear folks describe this as a narrative, a story. Storytelling is something that we were talking about earlier. This is sometimes contrasted with referring to a journey, and I've heard some faculty search committee members have a strong negative reaction to that word. I don't share that, but at the same time, I think a story has an arc A story is much more cohesive and driving you forward, whereas a journey might look unfocused. It might look unstrategic or intentional. So just be mindful of whatever word you use to describe um, the evolution of your work. That it does have that narrative storytelling kind of overarching uh, compelling nature rather than lists or rather than necessarily just a chronology or a diary entry of that kind. So it can be temporal to the point of the earlier presentation, and you will often see past and current and future being subheadings. But often, folks will choose themes or research questions and basically incorporate the past, current, and future in each of those themes. That's also another way of structuring your research statement in a tight way and in a compelling way. The nice thing for me, what I found really valuable about writing a research statement was that I had two things that recommended me back in the midst of time. One was some methodologies that are broadly used across different areas, but also some interest in transdiagnostic risk factors, which meant that I got tapped on the shoulder to be involved with a lot of different kinds of projects. If you're looking at my CV, it might look like I had some problems with focus. Let's just put that diplomatically. But my research statement was a way for me to explain that. It was a way for me to say, to really focus on the work that I did that was core and what I was going to do next. But when I commented on methodology, I could even include a note saying, uh, this expertise in this kind of analytic strategy or this kind of methodology has actually allowed me to collaborate more broadly within my department than I envisioned, and just kind of including a statement or two about to explain essentially how this methodological or other content expertise is in fact enables broader collaborations, and then it can kind of explain things in your CV in a handy way. Um, but I would note you don't need to explain everything in your CV. Your CV is a comprehensive document. You select and choose what you think is the most important to showcase in your research statement. You cannot include it all, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to. But showcasing that gap, that need, that critical research question and area that you're focusing on, and how that is really uniquely fit to your education and experience, that's the non-negotiable. That's one of the things that you really need to be highlighting and mindful of. It can be really nice to be noting the direction of the field. Not all research statements include references, and I don't know that you need to, but this can be a way to note, like, there's a recent Lancet review or something that really talks about research priorities. If the World Health Organization recently laid out research priorities, feel free to be noting that this is the direction of the field and recently identified priorities, and you are directly responsive to that. It shows that you've got that broad lens, that you're not getting too lost in the weeds of your own work, and that you're also aware of these broader international consortiums and that may have recommendations, and that you're mindful of that, and you're ensuring alignments with important international bodies. And I've already mentioned the timeline piece, so I'll go on to pages 2 and 3. So while and again, this is, broadly speaking, if you are going with a past and current and then a future kind of format, having your past and present be on page 1 so that pages 2 and 3 can be really focused on what you're proposing to do is a nice structure. But if you do it organized by themes, then these kind of page recommendations may not map on as naturally. But just to reinforce the earlier points, you do want to start with that broad picture, then have that increased focus. You do want to demonstrate unique expertise and nuanced expertise. The realities of a lot of our methodologies is that the devil is in the details, and showing that you're aware of that, and that you do rigorous science, but while still staying on the side of simplicity and making sure that your research statement is accessible to a broad range of readers is something of the work of a research statement. But then identify approximately three initiatives, projects that you are envisioning with those differences in focus or methodology, etc., essentially showing, as noted earlier, that you don't have all of your eggs in one basket. All research, certainly clinical research, is something of a game of dodgeball. We all know it, and we want to know that you've got some diversity and flexibility within your research program to absorb setbacks, whether or not it's methodology or recruitment related to funding or other related. That said, fundability will be critical to defend. Showing a consistent funding history of your own is wonderful. If you've had any kind of pilot or grants or initial research funding, that is always effective, but it's also possible to showcase fundability in other ways, which I'll continue on. But this is another place where you can show alignment, not only with international bodies, but also with the institutional strategic priorities. And that, again, shows you've done your homework, but also shows that you fit. And then again, concluding with impact. So yeah, as noted earlier, independence is something that you are well positioned to speak to explicitly, and to really talk about what expertise you own, what leadership that you've shown, and where you've been breaking from your mentor, if you like, in terms of branching into new ground rather than just continuing within your mentor's research program. So this is a great place to be talking about collaborators, as you note, as well as your role within these collaborations. Like, why are you part of these collaborations? What unique expertise are you bringing to them such that they want you as part of their teams? And this is one of the places where your professional network really shines through. Your professional network is your asset, just like your education and your experiences. Use it, and you can use it in different ways, but this is one of the places to do that. Use I strategically. You certainly want to be owning what you yourself have done, but honoring the folks who've invested in you to get you to this point, and not pretending that like a lot of science is team science, if not all, these days. And so, be mindful and respectful of the larger groups that have contributed to the work that you've done. But so own where you can, but not in a way that is in any way, not being respectful of your previous mentors and the broader teams that you've been part of. But it's that final point which I think is the most important, and it's been made, which is you're more than an extension of your advisor. You are branching out, you're breaking new ground. You have a unique program of research that's related. Of course, you're building on that foundation, but it's different. It's yours. Fundability is something that we've mentioned a few times now, and I don't think I need to belabor this too much. Certainly, is this fundable is a key question. Are there established funding pathways? Mentioning existing or recent calls is a strategic thing to do. Mentioning past funding, but more than anything, talking about realistic timelines. Gantt charts are not a bad thing even to include in I've seen those in some research statements, not all, but talking about pilot data you already have in hand, or that will be one of the first tasks that you take on. If you already have pilot data, that is actually sets you apart in a way that's really exciting, because that's something that you need when you're applying to your initial operating funds. And all of those things come together to show fundability, in addition to, of course, things like salary awards and other awards that show that you are competitive and that you are a good investment, quote unquote, in as much as you're able to bring in the kinds of funds that are needed to do the kind of work you plan to do. Publications, as mentioned, is something that you're able to weave in to your research statement, and but be mindful that you certainly don't need to touch on all of them. And what you really want to be focusing on is those that are most core to your research program, ones that you have had the greatest leadership role on, i.e., first or last authorship frequently reflects that, and something that it showing some amount of work that is independent of your mentors is really recommended if it's at all possible. And as ever, the total number of papers, it tells us something, but it doesn't tell us as much as these other pieces. And that these other pieces are what your search committees are more likely to pay attention to. The quality of those publications, your role in those publications, and the fit of those publications with your research statement, with your research plan. If you've got any kind of gaps or any pivots in there, though, please include a brief statement to explain them. Sometimes, you will have taken a hard right in your journey. It happens. It certainly has happened with me. And just if there's a gap, if there's a change in course, including even a brief statement to provide a bit of context is helpful. You don't need to apologize for it. This isn't about that. This is more just about not having it be an area of confusion. Clarity is always what you're going for. Don't leave your hiring or search committee guessing. And as noted earlier, methods can be such a powerful currency. That's often where folks kind of shine through. If you're applying to an area which has brought up a certain kind of content area that's of interest, and you're kind of adjacent to it, but what you're really good at is the methods that are used in that content area, sometimes that can bridge the gap. And in other cases, you may have a topic that's so far, because of opportunity and available funding, has been somewhat narrow, but your methods can be really broadly used. They're very transferable to a broad range that can also be really important and to showcase and speak explicitly to. But yeah, be explicit about where your skills are: quantitative, qualitative, clinical, translational, whatever the case may be. Patient engagement, knowledge mobilization, implementation, all of these things are important. Populations and data sets are increasingly open, but it doesn't mean that people are using them right. Do you know how to engage with the shortcomings of our wonderful archival data sets that many people are making use of to answer important questions? And those are where you're going to start your journey, for example. But see, now I'm using journey, it's got in my head. But things like that are a really effective way to speak to show depth of knowledge in addition to the capacity to start your research right away. And it's also a place that you can raise the bar within the program that you're applying to. If you can help build skills, build capacity, raise the game of the department, that's going to be good for them and for their trainees, and they know it. And as noted, do some recon on the department itself. You want to be able to signal your fit in clear terms, not in a way that's necessarily flattering, but in a way that shows that you are aware of the pulse of what's going on there, their strengths, their realities, what their pressure points might be. One of the things that's of interest in Ontario, at any rate, is that there are quality assurance programs that all of our universities need to go through. They need to happen at least every 8 years. Those are made public. It's required by law. You can go and look them up. You can see what the last QA process said about the strengths and the areas of growth. Those QA reports are based on the reports of students and faculty and external reviewers, and they're usually also reasonably brief. You don't need to read a whole magnum opus or a self-assessment necessarily. So that's one of the ways that you can get a bit of an insider scoop as to some of the places that you're going to be applying to, if you're finding that their website is perhaps a little bit out of date, or if it's just a little bit high level and doesn't help you to make an effective case for fit. But again, show your potential for collaboration. Giving examples of the folks that you could work with. Don't make it seem too dependent, like it'll only work if that person's there. But showing these touch points and potential collaborators, that is something that can show promise in areas of possible linkage, but not necessarily that your whole research program requires that. But as noted, generic statements are read like that, and you want to have statements that are specific to where you're applying. Okay, and I'm almost there, I promise. I've been talking for a little bit longer than I intended. Just wanted to mention a couple pitfalls. One is just really overly ambitious statements about wanting to make, sweeping changes to, the well-being of Canadians, for example, and that may well be your ultimate goal, but try to keep yourself to that 5-year plan, and perhaps talk about the broader impact of these things for healthcare policy and practice, but be mindful of the statements you're making. With regards to funding, the statements that I do sometimes see can be quite vague. Being a little bit more precise is worth your time. It shows that you have an idea of the funding landscape. But the biggest issue that I've seen is this third one, which is spending a lot more time talking about your past and your present, not enough time talking about what projects that you intend to implement. So be really mindful of that future planning part of your research statement. Don't be too broad. That's it's fine to be broad and to have that be a way, as noted, about showcasing capacity for collaboration or methodological or multidisciplinary capacity, but not in a way that makes you look unfocused. And also, as repeatedly noted, inaccessible language is something to be really, really mindful of. And balance your attention to things like mentorship and leadership with your science. Often you're going to be including a teaching dossier in your application as well. You can make note and bake in things like mentorship into your research statement, but I wouldn't put in necessarily too much of that, because you have dedicated space for that elsewhere in your application. Similarly with leadership, you can include some amount of leadership, but there's also, we're search committees. We have managed expectations about the amount of leadership you've had the capacity to do at this point. Leading a project is very meaningful. Being able to show that you've done that and that you've stayed on top of the many, many regulations and budgetary and people and experiences kinds of realities that are implicit in leading any kind of research project is enough, honestly. And we see that, we know that. Yeah, and finally, make it easy to advocate for you. You're going to have people reading your dossier research statement. As mentioned, we want to basically say this person's fundable, they fit, they'll thrive. It's useful to have those clear headings and signpostings. One of the first things my mentor always said is, what's on your t-shirt? Expect that people are going to be whittling you down to a t-shirt when talking about you in meetings. Oh, is that the person who does whole brain modeling? Is that person? Make sure that you've got like at least a couple hooks like that that can make at a high level what's on your t-shirt clear, so that people can be advocating for you in a clear way. Use consistent language across your documents, and just make it easy on us, basically. And I just wanted to kind of end with some final general comments. One is just manage your expectations. Any job market is a grueling piece of work. It is a thing to pull these applications together, put them out into the world, and to get absolute crickets for months. And it's hard. Be kind to yourself. Get a peer group, but anticipate that you'll have a low proportion of responses. I did this, and I can tell you right now, I had a remarkably low proportion of responses. Uh, so expect that. Apply as broadly as you're able. Don't apply to a place you know you won't work. That's a waste of your time. It doesn't make any sense, but apply as broadly as you can within that parameter that you would want to go there. As noted earlier, you're going to have multiple and diverse readers, and practicing, like having other readers of your research statement is something I couldn't echo more, but also practice your talks and practice your interviews. A lot of your interviews will start virtually. Make sure that you've practiced even that, and be mindful of what's in your background. How well lit are you? How's your Wi-Fi? And for just, for your own sake, try to avoid having notes that you're looking off of when replying to questions. We can see it, we can tell. Practice these things in advance. You'll look a lot more confident, and you'll just be more collected in the room if you're not trying to navigate yourself between four different screens at the same time. It's just easier on your working memory, and it shows you off better. But even I know that I have gotten ready for a virtual interview, sat down, and what I was wearing would have been fine for in person, but on a screen looked absolutely ridiculous. So just make sure you take a bit of time to prep in advance, because the last minute changes can be a little bit rattling. And with regards to references, I think these days, a lot of times your CV and your research statements and your documentation are what's going to stand out most for you. But make sure that your references have a really close knowledge of you, that they can make clear statements about your independence, back you up. It can make clear statements about your leadership of your own science. They can compare you to peers. A lot of times, people will say, uh, that letters don't really help people stand apart. And I agree with that, but they can sometimes pull you out of the running. So you want to make sure that your letter writers are aware that if there's anything less than kind of effervescent, enthusiastic endorsement of you, that it's going to hurt you more than help you. And it's great to speak to fundability if possible. And I think that might be, yeah. Final thoughts. Just assume it, like all of your search committee members have been where you are. We want good things for all of you. So assume that goodwill, but assume that folks, joined a search committee on top of an already full plate, and that they therefore have limited time. So again, be kind, signposting, formatting, all of those things. And yeah, and I'll end with that clarity point, which I know has been well repeated, but is, I think, my bottom line in terms of recommendations. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I think it's really great how you can see that me and Lena have very different perspectives on this, or different approaches to it, because took more of the theoretical path and Lena took more of the applied path of sharing her experiences. But a lot of overlaps in the major themes, and really hope that you hear those things that we've said multiple times and reiterated, because they really are the important things that we want you to remember, of the key things that will set you apart. So definitely keep that in mind. So now we actually still have lots of time for questions. The session goes to 2. We know that not everybody may be able to make it to stay all the way to 2. But we have that time, and we'll start going through your questions. Feel free to add your questions to Slido at any point in time. I see Jordan has been putting the link in the chat, which is fantastic. You can also join at slido.com and add in the code 4126088, or use the QR code on the slide. So again, I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. If you see a question that's already up there that you also have, definitely upvote those, because that'll make sure that the most popular questions go to the top. So our first question that we have is how to frame pivot from postdoc to PI program. Do they want to see that you're working on something similar to your experience? What if you're someone who jumps a lot? PhD and postdoc were slightly different, and you want to work on a brand new problem as a PI. Do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll give it a try, although feel free to to add your perspectives as well after. I think in terms of how to frame is science related. You might have been working on one area of research for your graduate degree, and then another area that's related either content or methodologically for your postdoc. The next transition should be similarly well. While I was doing my postdoc, uh, you know, these are the next steps in this line of research. These are what I want to take on. It can be a natural growth in terms of these are the next theoretical gaps I want to take on. These have clear implications for policy and practice, but that requires a different kind of requires a new series of projects to take that to close that gap between the knowledge to action. So consider it first from a research perspective, if at all possible, like in terms of, well, where are the research aims and projects that you want to be taking on, and then you're more pitching the projects and then showing that your graduate and postdoc have basically served as the invaluable foundation that means you're able to take those next pieces on. So if you find that your PhD and your postdoc are really quite different, see if you can find unifying themes in terms of methods or impacts or populations, something like that. However, if you're finding that your PI really that your PI proposed projects are in areas that you've never led that kind of research, that's going to be a bit of a tough sell. And it might be worth finding a bit of a hybrid approach, perhaps, where you can be talking about how you're branching into this new area. So you're going to, and in some way show that you're going to have the supports in place to be taking on something that's has some true novelty to you. So in that way, it doesn't look like it's so much of a jump that you couldn't possibly lead that science. Amanda, what do you think? Would you agree?
I agree completely. I think it's really important to pick those common themes, like you mentioned. If you're picking something that's 100% different, you worked in microbiology and now you're going to work in cancer with completely different methods, completely different skills that you're going to need and things like that, you are going to have a hard time showing that you have a track record and that you're capable of doing that project. That project may be really cool, but there might be someone else out there that's better suited to tackle that problem. So it's okay to definitely pivot to a new project or a slightly different field, but focus on the shared themes and any skills or experiences that you've had in your past that still makes a good track record to show that you are the right person to complete that project. Another thing I'll say is that I've seen scientists before who have, a passion project that they want to complete and they want to switch fields because they're really interested now in something that's totally different what they were working on in the past. And it might be better to keep that in your back pocket and do that once you've established your lab properly. Maybe once you're past tenure, you can take a bit more risk, or once your lab has a lot of funding. But try to focus on things that are more feasible to start, because those are the things that are going to sell to the institution that you have a path to success. So it's okay to have broad interests and to want to do other things, but maybe focus on some of the things that are more feasible and more aligned with your experiences to start.
Mhm. I love that.
The next question, how should our research program fit within other existing labs at the hiring institution? Should we be strategic about not stepping on toes and finding new territory? I could start that one off and say, I think you've hit it exactly. I think if you pick a topic where they already have an expert in that field, they don't need you to hire. They don't need to hire you because they already have somebody filling that gap. So you want to look for a complementary gap that you can fill in that institution. Often most of our institutions are very collaborative, so I don't think it's necessarily worrying about like stepping on people's toes, but thinking about the unique contribution you can bring, the unique value you can bring, and then how you can collaborate with other people. So if there are people working in that field that are in similar areas, but you're going to take a different approach, or you have a different skill set, or you have a resource that you're bringing to that can help with their projects, I think that's a way to tie in strategic fit, but always thinking about carving out your own niche because that's what's also going to make you successful for funding applications. You can't be doing the exact same thing that 10 other people are doing because otherwise, why would they fund you? They'll fund somebody else. So, to being able to tell that story about what the unique questions you're going to answer or the unique way that you're going to do it. Any other thoughts there?
No, I really agree. I think it's there's so much good work to be done. Hopefully, it's possible if you there's someone there who does work that's very related to yours, that you can find a way to frame your road forward as being um, complementary to theirs, and in fact even elevated by the fact that they have such a leader in the field already doing this work, and so you're excited by the collaborative opportunities afforded while you do this work that's very much aligned with that strategic priority, something like that, that's basically putting yourself and these other team members into a larger bucket, and just showing your unique value. So again, less about worried about stepping on toes than making sure that the search committee doesn't think you're redundant.
Great. Next question, how specific should you be with your future research? Should you propose specific projects that would help you achieve your overarching goal and highlight the methodologies and approaches you would use? How specific should you get? Do you want to take that one?
Sure. And I would say, if you've had a chance to see summaries of operating grants, like for example, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research will publish things like complete summaries and so on, and abstracts. That can be a useful jumping off point. But I would say I would suggest that yes, you do want to propose specific projects that you intend to be taking on to be advancing the field and moving you towards the aims, the research aims that you've outlined, and getting into the methodologies and approaches that you intend to use with some detail, but with calling back to earlier statements about being mindful of your audience and that you don't want to be only speaking to people who are niche experts. So, but being able to speak to the nature of the data that you'd be using, the nature of its collection, the nature of its analysis, and being able to show that you've got competencies there, that you've led that kind of work before, that you're well positioned to lead it here and now, is a very reasonable thing to do. So get as specific as you can without losing a non-specialist audience is my advice for that last point, which is something that which is why I called out the CIHR complete summaries, because they can sometimes show you like that's a reasonable level of resolution in many cases, to get at. Although your multiple readers will be able to help you fine tune your level of resolution and detail to make sure that you're showing off that you know your stuff without getting so detailed that you've lost all but the one other person who does the work in the department similar to you. And keep in mind that's the case in many cases, that you will often have only 1 to 3 people who will know the nitty gritty of the epigenetic stuff that you intend to do, or the imaging innovations that you're looking to get into, or the network analysis version that you're especially fond of. And so just be mindful of the audience. Anything that you'd add?
Yeah, I love that. I think that what you're really showing is how you think like a scientist,
Yeah.
and they want to see that you've thought about all the methodology because that's where they're going to be able to tell Yeah, do you know what you're talking about? Have you thought about these experiments in depth? And is that the best path you could take to getting the answer you need? And often those are the things that the scientists care about the most is like, how are you going to really answer that? So I think it really shows how you think, and it leads up to what you'll talk about in your chalk talk and in your other components of your interview. I think I see this also as kind of your future research that you're describing kind of outlines what you would write in your first grant when you're an independent researcher. So if you can, maybe look at a grant that your PI or somebody else in your department has submitted and kind of see the level of detail they give because CIHR project grants, they go into not just the aims, but the methodology that's going to be used. Because again, that's how somebody assesses whether you actually will be able to feasibly do that project and whether your approach is sound. So thinking about this research statement and your future research as kind of like the parts of your future grants and thinking about how you would describe them there. And I think that level of detail can be similar,
Mhm.
depending on the page limits for those grants.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what are the common pitfalls or errors you see in research statements or applications in general? Advice for things you can avoid doing. I think Lena already shared some. I'll add that I've edited people's research statements in the past, and I find that people often either go too broad or way too specific. So you either read it and I'm like, I'm not an expert in your field. I have no idea what you're talking about. Like I have a PhD, but I don't know what you're talking about because it's too specific. You've gone way too jargony, too much into acronyms. You've assumed too much background knowledge. That can really make it completely unreadable. Or the opposite, I've seen people go too broad or too big picture, where you're talking about how you're going to cure cancer, but you don't actually show the feasible approach that you're going to take to get there. So I think really getting a balance between the level of detail and tailoring it to the audience is important. Um, I think other mistakes are, Lena already said, is including too much about your past and current research, not focusing enough on your future. And I think there too, I think people feeling like they need to talk about everything they did in grad school or everything that they did in their postdoc, and then it doesn't tell a good comprehensive story. You really want to just pick out the most important pieces, the most impactful pieces, the ones where you had first author papers instead of the one that you were a seventh author or things like that, and focusing more real estate on the things that tell a comprehensive story of your research. And as we've mentioned very many times, a lot of times you do have side projects and things that you're really lucky got published or collaborations that led to publications, but they don't tell a clear story necessarily. And you really just want to make it seem like you had a plan the whole time, and this is how your plan looks and how you're showing that you can achieve the goals that you set out. Nobody has everything mapped out ahead of time, and that's okay. All of us take winding paths, but by pulling out the parts that are most relevant, that's how you can tell a more comprehensive story. Anything else you would add?
No notes. Yeah. Uh, Nothing I'd add to that.
Perfect. So do programs consider personality fit? Do political views, social media presence, etc. matter here? Pass them to you.
Sure, sure. I'm happy to take a first crack at it. I'm not sure about personality fit so much as collegiality, and to some degree, I guess collegiality and personality are correlated. People want to. People are well aware that the person who is hired to this position will be working with them for years, some cases decades. This person is going to be at the same table with them in a variety of different committees. So having someone who is a good colleague, someone who cares about the institution in addition to their own career trajectory, someone who um, is high integrity, high collegiality, and able to work well with others. That, yeah, I would say that programs would say that that matters. And one of the good ways for your research statement to show off that part of you is your collaborations. If people want to work with you, like that tells a story on its own. Is that that's not a noxious thing to do, for example, that they want to work with you. In terms of politics and social media presence, it's rare that I see search committees do a social media reconnaissance effort on the people who are interviewing. That's not a common thing, but I think it is a reasonable thing to expect at least one person on your search committee to take a look at your LinkedIn and your and and uh, and Twitter if you have it, or Blue Sky, or whatever the case may be. So be mindful of what's out there. Not to have it be consistent with any particular political view, but that it's not necessarily uncollegial or inflammatory, or looking in some way um, that there could be some risk to the institution because of um, I guess those kinds of, I guess, inflammatory types of content. But really, it's rare. I never have, frankly, but I would expect it to just like assume that somebody will Google you, assume that somebody will take a look at your LinkedIn, and somebody will take a look at your Twitter. But it's not necessarily to rule out or in any particular content than it is to look for warning flags that suggest that there's something potentially concerning. But I'm keeping that vague because it is that vague in my experience, because I haven't seen people ever look for something specifically. Yeah, so for what it's worth, that's been my firsthand experience. I'm not sure if you'd add anything to that, Amanda.
Yeah, I think you covered it well. I think it's always important to think about your own personal branding, right? So what you're putting out there, and anything that you post publicly is out there for people to see, and you want it to represent who you are in a professional manner. So thinking about, using LinkedIn in a professional capacity to highlight your successes and the great things about you is really strategic. And maybe the other things about yourself that are more personal, you don't want to put those out publicly so that they focus on the professional aspects of yourself instead. So I think sometimes thinking about it from a branding point of view of what would you want a search committee to learn about you if they did Google you is a great way to think about it. Another question we have is, can you propose a research program when you're being hired? More strategic, and then change the program over time based off of your evolving interests.
I'm nodding, so maybe I'll start.
Yeah, yeah,
But
sorry. I was seeing you nodding, so I assumed you would start.
yeah, strong yes. I absolutely, and in fact, I would suggest that this is probably the reality of 50 to 80% of the people who are in the health sciences. It we And I don't even think that that's remotely undesirable, because you would expect that your interest would evolve with the findings that you come across, with our evolving health priorities and needs in the research space, also with where the funding opportunities are or where they dry up. Like there's going to be realities that you need to be responsive to in addition to your interests, and people will expect that. But showing that you've got you've got strategic areas that are aligned with your skills and your interests, and are fundable, and then expecting that you're not stuck there, is I think a very, very reasonable thing. I came to CAMH in 2005, and at that time I had a very specific focus on. It was a depression treatment research back in the day. I still do that research, but I do a whole lot of other stuff now because of exactly this evolving interests. And it's one of the joys of the job. I thought I would be in a nice, comfortable rut by now, but anything but. And that's what makes it such an exciting career trajectory.
I love that this question ties in perfectly to the next question, which is how much of the future research plans are speculative? Assuming that how do we make it realistic in terms of budget, timelines, and resources? And I think that you really are making a plan that you think could be successful. Yes, some of it is going to be tied to other parts of your project working. But what you really want it to be to make it, you want to make it clear that no matter what happens, you will be successful. So you don't want to tie all of your research based off of one experiment that has to work, one, part of a project that has to work in order to tie all of your next 5 years together. It's okay for your plan, and your plan should be adaptive to whatever you find and wherever the science takes you, because we all know that's how science is. You kind of go where things evolve. But I think having a clear plan of these are my different aims, these are the different directions I could go, is important so that you can show you have backup plans, you have multiple approaches you can take. Um, and no matter where it takes you, you're going to be successful. So, yes, you don't know what will happen, but you want to show that no matter what happens, you have a direction to go to and you will be successful. I think one of the biggest things is making it realistic is really thinking about picking projects or picking structuring your research in a way where it's actually feasible. And I think in that case, it's about really thinking about the methodology you're proposing. How likely is it to succeed or is it to fail? If you have something that's a bit riskier, what's your backup plan if that doesn't work? So if you're taking I don't know, a single cell approach and you have a really small population of cells and you might not get enough DNA from, what's your backup to answering that question with a different approach? So it's really thinking about plan A, plan B, plan C. So no matter what happens, you'll be successful. Um, and yeah, your budget will change and things will evolve over time, but really thinking about those details will make sure that they can see that you'll make it work somehow. I don't know,
Mhm.
uh, do you want to add something there, Lena?
No, I think those are all great points. I think this is where having multiple projects really helps you because you can include uh, projects that you can get started on right away, even with limited capacity, and usually no capacity to have acquired external funding by that point. Making use of either knowledge syntheses or open data sources or existing collaborative relationships or data you yourself that have collected that is kind of intended for this purpose, while you're also applying for external funding and to take on other pieces. And you can also just think in terms of, well, what's the most common startup that I'm likely to get. Let me kind of keep that in my mind as the kind of place to start in terms of initial budget and initial resourcing that I expect I could uh, likely have as a resting assumption of my plans for years 1 and 2, and I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. Startup packages are very different from program to program. You can ask about local norms and there's Reddit threads exactly about this, and they give you an idea of the ballpark. It does. I could throw out some values, but frankly, they're so different from one area of science to another that I actually suspect it would cause more confusion than clarity.
One other thing that I just thought of is thinking about things in terms of I know this person who was starting a zebrafish lab at an institution that didn't have any zebrafish facilities at the time. And so in that case, they have to think about the fact that it might take a year or 2 years to fully develop a zebrafish facility. Because for those of you who haven't done zebrafish research before, it requires lots of tanks, breeding of fish that takes a long time to do. You need staff that are trained in how to breed those fish and all the things like that. And it can take multiple years. So you want to have kind of that baked in if you were applying to an institution that doesn't have those facilities already. So maybe thinking about how you could have dry lab projects for the first couple of years or basic research projects for the first couple of years while that facility is being set up or while you're obtaining that really expensive piece of equipment that you need for your research. So having, some additional projects where you're not planning a 5-year project that relies on 2 years of setup, right? So thinking about those kind of things in terms of timeline and resources, because it may take a long time to set up your lab if you have really specific methodology or tools or things that you need that aren't already at that facility or that institution. Next question is, why is having a focus so important? I think that's a great question. I think we've kind of alluded to this many times, but your research statement has to tell a story of how you're the right person to complete the project that you're proposing, or why you're the only person that could answer that specific problem in the field that you're proposing to address. And so having a focus so that your application tells a story of the skills, the experience, the track record, the fundability that you have that led you to that research question and that will lead to your success in answering that question, I think is really important. Because if you were kind of all over the place and you've done a lot of different projects on different topics, the committee might not really get the clear sense of why you're the person with the right unique skill set to address that problem. Anything you would add there?
Yeah, I agree with everything you mentioned. It's just it's hard to show fit without showing what your focus is, and which was I think Amanda's point that um, folks want to know what you're bringing, and your projects lay that out in more detail, but your focus or your aims brings it together and shows, it's the branding and the t-shirt of it that makes and of course you're more than that, and you're also not rigidly stuck with that, but it is a shorthand way that people can quickly judge things like fit and what you bring.
There were some people in the chat who really loved your t-shirt analogy. I think it is a great one to think about. Um,
It's hard.
no, totally hard. Yeah. You don't want to put yourself in a box or summarize yourself in a couple of words, but it's important to know, yeah, what your brand is and what you want to
Yeah.
make your selling points and you want people to remember you by. Another question I'll pass over to you. How can a recent PhD or postdoc with limited funding and experience compete against senior applicants for the same position? What early career advantages, like longevity, adaptability, or niche technical skills, should they highlight to offset a shorter track record?
Mhm. Well, I certainly think of the advantages you note. The methodological skills are one of the greatest areas, but I wouldn't. There is a broad range of seniority, as you note, in applicants to a single position, and your applications are often judged by the search committee with reference to the opportunities that you've had. In some cases, there may be a like either local norms or preferences to only bring on board folks who've been out in the field for a certain minimum amount of time to ensure that they have some degree of readiness. But I think more often than not, the number of years that you're in the field doesn't necessarily translate into more or less readiness. And what folks are looking for is really the productivity within the time that you've had, and good ideas for where to go next, and that those ideas are mapping on to health research priorities and the priorities of the institution. So I think this is doing what you can to be showing off and strategically building your CV to the best that you can, despite not necessarily being X many years out, is the work of this career stage. I'm well aware. I've been there. But I think uh, people are going to expect different things of someone who's 2 years out their degree than someone who's 6 years out the degree, and they're not going to be evaluating you the same way.
I agree. And the other thing I would say is just that sometimes there are specific calls that are clear at what level they're looking at because the budget lines for somebody who's early career or somebody who's coming in at a full professor status are going to be very different. So if they're looking for somebody in a leadership position who's going to be the chair of a department, then they're looking for somebody with many years of experience, and that would be a better fit for those individuals. Whereas other calls might be more clear that they're looking for somebody to start their labs. So just keeping in mind those details before you start putting together your application, making sure it's the right fit.
Mhm.
Next question is, are there always formal job postings or will institutions make room for talent? I'll pass that one to you.
It's a great question, and um, I think there's some changes in this over time. I think uh, in the past, there might have been more opportunity for uh, institutions to find the money when they see promising candidates out there who are looking uh, so you hear stories about this kind of thing occurring and I don't want to suggest that it may not still occur to a limited degree. However, I think there's a couple of considerations in the space now that I think formal job postings are increasingly uh, part of the process for everyone in an effort to increase equity and access at all the stages of the hiring process. There's also just straight up budget realities. It is making room for talent is something that I think we all want to do, but we also need to have available budget too. So it's rare that we have sudden or unexpected budget elbow room of the kind that would bring on board a sustainable independent researcher as well as a startup package that would convince them that this is the place to do their research. So it's not a small budget reality to have that kind of funding um, for salary plus startup. So I would suggest that even if in the past there might have been more opportunities for ad hoc kinds of or or perhaps yeah, I guess different, more, I guess, organic. I don't know how to say it. Leveraging your professional networking to have jobs come about. I think that's increasingly rare. I can't think of a scientist position here at CAMH that we've had that didn't have a formal posting for some time. And in fact, I don't know if I can think of one full stop. And I think it's an important part of all of our commitment to making sure that these kinds of positions are something that a much broader range of researchers have access to, awareness of, and capacity to compete for. And it's an important part of all of our commitment to not just have people who know people get access to the jobs, which is something that happens when you don't do formal job postings, is that you can really miss out um, and just not be true to your values in that respect. So I think that shift from maybe 10 plus years ago has really been effective, at least in the institutions that I'm part of. I don't know if you'd say the same, Amanda. I suspect so,
Absolutely.
based on
Yeah.
what I know of UHN.
I think that you have to remember that these positions are very competitive, and the institutions want to make sure that they're getting the best person. And so
Yeah.
that means that they're going to want to get a broad pool of applicants so that they can ensure that, if they only get to hire once every couple of years, that they're finding somebody absolutely exceptional that's a perfect fit, and they're not just basing it off of who they know. So the competition really makes it, yeah, and the importance of equity and accessibility.
Mhm.
So we have about 5 minutes left, so we'll just ask a couple more questions. I know somebody's asking about successful research statements. If you follow the links in my presentation, many of the websites online have examples of successful research statements that you can look at for examples. And I saw that Lauren put the program website into the chat. So that's where you can find past recordings as well as slides, and we'll get our recording and our slides put up there later. So the next question is, given that AI nowadays has been used to help in research statement writing and committee reviewing, how can we write to stand out from those AI-assisted research statements? I think this question is really important, but I think it's also important to recognize um, the powers and the limitations of using AI. And so often, if you put something into ChatGPT or any kind of other platform, it'll give you something. But especially when we're talking about scientific fields that are really detail focused, where every little detail is important and that shows how you're thinking about your project and your research plan. AI is not going to be able to figure out all of that and have it accurate. There are many problems with accuracy, with references, and a lot of those kinds of things when using AI. So I think that having a real person write it means that your story is going to be coherent, the scientific facts are going to be correct. Often AI writing is too fluffy and not as technical or as concise or succinct as scientific writing should be. There's often too many buzzwords. So I think that more and more people are getting used to being able to identify things that have been written with AI. Um, because they do sound different than what a human would write, and I know that that changes over time as these technologies evolve. But I really think the key part is that you're the expert in your field, so you're the best person to be writing those scientific details and planning out your methodologies, and those details make a big difference. So yes, using AI to help, refine or give suggestions or things like that can be great. But I think writing it yourself is important to ensure accuracy, that the methodologies are right, and that it's a reflection of your writing, which is a reflection of your scientific communication skills and your fundability. Any other thoughts there?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. The only thing I'd add is I haven't been part of any committee that used AI for review. I'm not naive. I suspect it may well be a tool that's increasingly used, but it's not as widespread, at least as yet, as you might think. And as noted, AI writing is a lot more transparent than many people realize. Although I'm sure everybody on this call is increasingly able to spot it a mile away, and just nobody uses that many adjectives.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I would say the one thing I have seen people use AI for when reviewing applications, not exactly for faculty positions, but maybe I've seen people use it to put in some of your publications and get a better insight of journals that they might be more specialized with a particular field that the committee member might not be aware of. So might use AI to ask about the relevance or like how important that or how respected that journal is in the field, or especially I find that people in AI or computational fields, their conference abstracts are more important than their publications. Many things are published in conference abstracts instead of in publications. And so people who are outside, excuse me, of that field might use AI to help them to understand, is this a signal of that this person is in the top 10% or things like that? And just learning more about the journals or the conferences that you may be referencing.
Mhm.
So I think that with 1 minute left, we'll leave it there. I know we didn't get to all of your questions, but I hope you feel like we've answered quite a few of them. Um, I want to thank you all for joining us. Just want to reiterate, you will get an email about the feedback surveys, and that information is really important to us. We've made so many improvements from the first iteration of this program to now, and we want to continue improving for the next iterations. So we appreciate that feedback, and we hope that you feel a little bit more equipped to write your research statements.
All the best out there.
Thank you.